Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to another drmyrna Minute. I am listening to Shirley Caesar, Fill This House. We're going to wait a few more minutes to allow some persons to hop on in. But as we wait, let us listen to Reverend Shirley Caesar.
Let it fill the house. Fill the house. That house that's called a hospital. Let it fill that house. Fill the house. Somebody has been given up to die. Fill the house. Send your anointing down. Send a life in that hospital. Fill it. Fill the house. In that hospital room. Hallelujah. There we need you. Fill the house.
Thank you for tuning in. Fill the house. Yes. Yes, had to go back for a little while and listen to some Reverend Shirley Caesar to fill the house as we prepare to continue in our relationship series. Let us go to the throne of grace. Eternal God, our Father, the one who provides us with hope and joy. God, we just center in and focus on you, oh God, as we ask for your wisdom, dear God. We ask for your guidance, God. We ask for your direction. God, I pray that those who are present and those who may hear this after, if they enter into this space with heavy hearts, God, that you be the lifter of their heads and the lifter of their heart, oh God. God, we just surrender everything unto you because we recognize that you are the God that's able to hold, to sustain, and to deliver. That you are the God that's able to heal and set free. That you are the God that's able to restore, dear God. So right now, God, we just humble ourselves before you, dear God, and we ask for healing, for restoration, dear God, and transformation. God, I pray that you'll heal broken relationships, dear God, that you'll restore them, dear God, and that you will bring us in right relationship with you. For you are the one who teaches us and directs us on the importance of relationships. You are the one who explains to us and gives us direction on the meaning and value of relationships. And God, I recognize that it starts with us first. I recognize that it starts with our relationship with you. God, I recognize that we need to see the value in ourselves in order to see the value in one another. So, God, we just continue to look towards heaven. And we ask that you'll continue to lead, continue to direct, dear God. Continue to guide us, dear God, and provide us with your wisdom and your insight. In your Son, Jesus the Christ's name, we pray. Amen. Amen. I want to thank you for tuning in as we continue in our relationship series. On this evening, we are going to be looking at elements of healthy relationships and what I call the FFPs, which is simply four foundational principles. as we explore healthy relationships. I want to say good evening to everyone who has joined. And again, thank you for joining and taking the time out. So, last week we explored toxic relationships and how it impacts our overall well being. And tonight we're going to lift up the FF4s, the principles, and we're going to lift up what I call the three C's: compassion, consideration, and communication. So let's begin. So the FFPs is simply trust, honesty, respect, and boundaries. These four are foundational principles that are needed in order to build healthy relationships, right? Because in this season, in this new year, we want to be able to shift from unhealthy relationships to healthy relationships. And so let us begin with trust. And trust simply is the dependability or the reliance or the confidence in someone or something. When we think of trust, put it in the chat. What do you think of for you when you understand trust? How do you understand trust, especially as it relates to being in relationships? And so I really wanted to lift up trust, but I also wanted to lift up the importance and the role of reliability and how our reliability and when we demonstrate reliability helps us to build trust. It helps us to build trust because we need to know that the other person that we're in a relationship with is reliable and that they're consistent, right? And so when we have these two sisters, I'm going to say reliability and consistency, when they work together, it helps to build trust in the relationship. So we need to demonstrate reliability as we examine the importance of trust in the relationship. It's your reliability that demonstrates a pattern also of your character and that you can be trusted. And some might ask, trust with what? Trust with your love, trust with your time, trust with your commitment, and trust with what you value most. And what is it that you value most? Your heart, yourself, right? And so we want to be in relationships that demonstrate reliability and consistency so that we're able to connect and build trust with one another, right? So trust is a key foundational principles when we look at the four foundational principles, the FFPs. And so outcomes of reliability shows those who are in relationship with you that they're able to hold what you say, they're able to value what you share, they're able to demonstrate and match with what they speak with their action. That's why it's important to be reliable. That's why it's important to be consistent, right? As we explore trust. Because if you say you trust someone but your actions demonstrate that you're unreliable and that you're inconsistent, then you're going to have an issue with building and developing trust, which is foundational when we look at the importance of building a healthy relationship. And so the ability to be able to demonstrate reliability allows there to be security and freedom in the relationship because you're able to be vulnerable and share parts of yourself, right? To be able to share your heart, to be able to share your time, to be able to share your authentic self with someone, knowing that they're going to be able to hold what you say to them. They're going to be able to value you as a person, right? When you need them, they are going to show up, right? So we need trust, right? And we need the two sisters to show up, right? That reliability and that consistency. I'm calling them the two sisters. Okay. And so the next element that we need, the next principle is honesty. How many of us have been in relationships that may have ended because there was no honesty, right? Honesty is another valuable principle that's necessary in order to build and develop healthy relationships. right? When we are able to be honest in relationships, it allows the other person to be vulnerable. It allows the other person to be able to open their heart and to trust you with what they share. And most importantly, trust you with their heart, right? So, our ability to be vulnerable and express our truth, right? You want to be in a relationship where you can express your truth. You can express what you feel. You can express what you think. You can express your opinion and your ideas, knowing that you can be honest with this person and they in return can be honest with you. That they can hold what you share, right? That they can demonstrate that they value what you share and hold it. And they, in return, can also do the same, which demonstrates the importance of mutuality in relationships. It speaks to how you value someone. When we are honest with persons whom we are in relationships, it demonstrates that we value them. Honesty permits one to hold no harboring feelings, right? And when we're honest in our relationships, it allows us not to harbor feelings because the people who we are in relationship with, we are able to be honest with, right? And so when we're able to be honest with persons whom we are in relationships with, there's no need to harbor feelings because we're able to take what we feel, what we think, our opinions, and our ideas to the person. It allows us to be vulnerable, right? And so when we have this trust and this honesty, right, in the relationship, we don't have to harbor ill will because when we have these feelings or we have these thoughts, we're able to go to the person and to be honest, to present our authentic self, knowing that they are availing themselves to us to be vulnerable with us, to be able to listen to what we share, to be able to allow us to be vulnerable in a safe and sacred space, right? This is because they're demonstrating to us that they can be honest, which allows us to be honest, and that we can trust them with our honesty. A lot of times in relationships, we hold back and we're not able to be honest out of fear of the other person not being able to receive what we want to say, right? They're not able to hold what we share. Maybe we feel a sense of, well, they may judge us, right? But when we think about healthy relationships and the importance of trust and honesty, in order to be able to build these healthy relationships, we need trust and we need honesty. You should not have to be in relationships where you can't bring your authentic self, where you can't share what you feel and what you think and be respected, which moves us to our next principle, respect, right? We need to demonstrate respect in the relationship and show regard for the other, demonstrating again that we value them. When you're in a healthy relationship, you're able to demonstrate respect because you value the person who you are in relationship with, right? You're not going to do things that devalue people who you state that you care about, that you love, right? That you want to be connected with, right? So you're going to respect them because of how you perceive them. You're able to accept them for who they are. You're able to respect where they are, right? And you're able to see the value in the person. You're able to see the value in the person. And when we can do that, when we can see the value and embrace the humanity of one another, when we are in relationships, we're able to hold that person in high regard and high esteem. And we don't do things to cause them harm or to tear them down. Because remember, when we first started this series, when I began to talk about relationships, I talked about how we value the well being of the person, right? And so when we're in healthy relationships, we demonstrate that we value the person and their well-being. And so we demonstrate trust, we demonstrate honesty, and we demonstrate respect because we value them and we want the very best for them, right? And we're concerned with their overall well-being. So when we identify respect in the relationship and we hold people to high esteem, we don't use manipulation. We don't use control, right? Because we value them. Therefore, there's no need to try to manipulate or to control someone in a relationship when you value them, right? Because you value them as the person. You value their uniqueness, right? And you're able to be in relationship with them as they are. You're able to love them and consider them as they are, right? And so we don't use words that devalue or tear down, right? We lift up. We hold in high esteem when we respect the persons who we're in relationship and we don't demean them. We don't seek to control, and we definitely don't seek to manipulate them to get them to do what we want. Instead, we encourage, we support, and we lift up, and we don't tear down, which is opposite of what we talked about last week when we looked at toxic relationships, right? So, respect is a necessary principle as we explore building and developing healthy relationships. The fourth principle is boundaries. Put it in the chat. How many of you have healthy boundaries in your relationships? And so, boundaries and relationships are necessary because they allow persons to take responsibility. A lot of times, when we think of boundaries, we think of the other person first. But today, I want to lift up boundaries in us, our accountability to self, our accountability to us, rather than pinning everything on everyone who we are in relationship with, right? So it teaches us how to be responsible for our emotions, how to be responsible for our thoughts, and how to be responsible for our personal space. And we take ownership. When we take ownership of that, then we can communicate and acknowledge what we need from other people. But if we don't start with us and acknowledge it to ourselves first, how can we share it with someone else? And so, my ask to explain healthy boundaries. So, healthy boundaries considers one's emotional, intellectual, and physical boundaries, right? And so, emotional is the ability to recognize, express, and accept your feelings and communicate them, right? So I'm going to use myself as the example. I'm the one that's setting the boundaries, right? Emotionally, my emotional boundaries is for me to be able to recognize what it is that I need for me so I can take ownership of my emotions and what I need for my emotions and then be able to communicate that in the relationship, right? So if I recognize that I have different feelings that may come up, right? If something happens, then I can say, communicate that to the person who I'm in a relationship with, right? So if so crossing the boundary emotionally could be an example of if they say something negative to me, right? So I can say, I would appreciate it for me if you don't use that word to describe me because it makes me feel like A, B, C, or D, right? I'm acknowledging how words or behaviors or actions or deeds, whatever they may be, make me feel, right? So the first thing I'm doing is acknowledging and I'm taking responsibility for me and my emotions. And when I do that and I'm aware of that, then I can communicate that with whoever I'm in a relationship with, right? A lot of times we lead with our emotions or we become unraveled because we don't take responsibility for what we feel. right? Sometimes we can assume that the other person should automatically know, right? But how could they know if we never communicated it with the person, right? And so boundaries is really about us being responsible for us, being responsible for what I need for myself, right? To make myself feel safe, to provide safety and security for myself. And then the boundary invites other people into that, right? Let me know if that makes sense to you. The other boundary is intellectual. So what's our or what someone else's think, right? Is their intellectual boundary, what they think and what they believe, and where did it come from, right? A lot of times, um, our thought process or what we think can come from somewhere else. It's not ours, right? And so when we look at the intellectual boundary, it's encouraging us to know what we think and if we're the ones who form that thought, or did that thought come from culture or somewhere else, externally from not within ourselves, right? So, an intellectual boundary allows us, and I think it empowers us to be able to recognize, I think this for myself. And I can honestly say that's something that seminary did for me. It allowed me to own what I thought and what I believe for me and not base it on what I was told, right? Which allowed me to take responsibility for my own relationship with God and how I understood God and my relationship with God, rather than taking and believing what someone else said to me about God, if that makes sense. And so it's important for us to know why we believe what we believe and own it, right? And when we own it, other people are not able to cross that boundary or shake us because we own what we believe. We know why we think a certain way and we own it, right? So the intellectual boundary is not about being right or wrong. It's about owning your opinion, owning what you think, right? And not being easily persuaded by other people and what other people think. But you're able to own what you believe and what you think, right? That's the intellectual boundary. The next boundary that's important is the physical boundary, which is simply your physical space, right? How close do you want people to be to you, right? What can cause you harm or make you feel threatened when persons come into a certain proximity of your space, right? And where is that from? Right? To be able to recognize that and then be able to communicate it with the other person. Again, going back to our boundaries that we create allows us to be accountable for what we need, right? We acknowledge and we express and we become accountable for what we need. And we then express that to the person whom we are in relationship rather than thinking that they should already know, right? Mai says, should you be able to defend or explain the intellectual boundary? You don't have to explain it. You have to own it. So if I believed that the sky was red, I believe it and I'm owning it, right? The thought and opinion of someone else, I can respect that, right? But I'm not going to allow them to waver what I believe. And that's the difference between you being accountable to yourself in regards to what you believe, right? A lot of times, and we can see it today where we can be swayed like the wind, right? With what we believe and what we think. And we can think one way and then someone else can say something and then we change the way we think. So I would just encourage you to ask yourself why. Are you easily persuaded to go a different way because you don't really know what you believe or what you think, right? The purpose of boundaries is to take ownership, to be accountable to yourself, right? And we honor ourselves when we set boundaries. We honor ourselves because we're able to acknowledge this is what I need. And then we invite other people into relationship to respect our boundaries, therefore respecting us. It's not about trying to change somebody or get them to believe what we believe or think what we think, right? It's about learning how to honor the other, right? Remember, we don't have to agree, right? It's not, boundaries are not about agreeing with. It's about being able to acknowledge and respect yourself first, and then inviting people to be in relationship with you who can respect who you are, right? It's not about changing the other, right? And so the benefits of boundary is that it ensures one is not self-sacrificing themselves at their own demise. That's why it's important to recognize what it is you need so that you can communicate it to those who you are in relationship with. If you don't know what you need, how can you communicate it to someone else? Right? So you have to know what you need for yourself in order to be able to communicate it to someone else. Boundaries permit one to acknowledge what they want, what they need, and what they desire, and create healthy boundaries to establish them, right? Because I'm able to acknowledge to myself what I need, I'm able to express it to someone else, right? So that invites them into respecting me and my boundaries and giving me what I need from that relationship, because boundaries can be different per the relationship, right? I may have a different boundary when I'm working with someone in a professional relationship than I have with my husband at home or my children or my friends, right? So you establish the boundary in the different type of relationship that you are in, right? And we know that the basic or the five principal relationships are platonic, romantic, family, friendship, and professional. So depending on the role or the relationship that you're in, shapes and informs your boundary and what you need from that relationship and being able to express it. So, another benefit of setting boundaries is it permits you to acknowledge, to express, and to own what you think and what you feel, right? A lot of times we go with the wind or we're persuaded because we don't really know what we think or what we feel because we're going in or buying into someone else's and what they think and what they feel. That's why boundaries is really about you being accountable to yourself, which helps to build healthy relationships, right? And it also points to you knowing you being able to embrace your authentic self and invite other people in to embrace your authentic self, right? And so as we move on, I want to highlight the three C's, which is compassion, consideration, and communication. Compassion creates connection, right? Compassion creates us to be connected. In relationships, it permits tolerance, empathy, and promotes active listening. Miss Frost says, is there a situation or time that your boundaries might change or move? Yes. Because our boundaries are based on our needs, our boundaries can change and develop as we change and develop as we grow and develop, right? So the boundaries that I had when I was 20 may not be the same boundaries I have at 50, right? And I would dare to say that the boundaries I had at 20 were very loose. The boundaries I have at 50 are very clear because I understand who I am at 50 and I walk boldly and confidently in that, right? And because of that, I'm able to have clear boundaries set and be able to communicate that to other people. And yes, that was a great question, Mai. So thank you for sharing that question, Miss Ross. So our boundaries do change because we change. We develop as we get older, we develop, we mature, right? And so when we start out creating boundaries when we're younger, our boundaries may not be very tight, right? They may be loose, right? But as we progress and we develop, and we mature, right? And we become to know who we are as a person, our boundaries are very solidified and very clear. So at each stage of our life, I believe that our boundaries change because we change, hopefully, because we shouldn't be staying the same. Okay. So thanks for that, Ms. Ross. And so, as we look at the three C's, compassion, consideration, and communication, compassion creates us to connect. Relationships is important. Compassion is important in relationships because we need to be able to practice tolerance, empathy, and active listening, right? And so when we think about compassion in relationships, it demonstrates our ability, how we value another, how we value their pain, how we value their experience, and are able to be present with them in it. Right? So our demonstration of compassion really demonstrates how we can connect to the other. So it's not, our compassion is really an action. So it's not necessarily doing a lot of talking to be supportive, right? But it's doing more of the listening, being present and available to persons when they are suffering, when we know that someone we love are in a relationship and they are experiencing um pain or suffering. So that's important. And so we want to be able to connect on that level because we want to be able to walk along persons who we are in relationship with and demonstrate empathy and demonstrate active listening and demonstrate tolerance, right? The next C is consideration. Consideration because we can be trusted with what the person who we are in relationship with, what they share and what they feel and what they think to us. We have to know that it's not easy to be able to open up and be vulnerable with someone, right? And so if someone allows us in and invites us in, we need to be able to consider what they are sharing by listening to them, right? By demonstrating that we hear them and that we value what they are saying and that we are considering them, right? So, consideration demonstrates our level of commitment in the relationship and it demonstrates our action in the relationship. So, it's not just enough for us to speak or say that, oh, I'm considerate. What does your action show? Do your actions demonstrate that you're considerate to the other? Or does it demonstrate something differently? Right? When we demonstrate consideration in the relationship, we demonstrate that we value the other person, that we respect the other person, and that we are making ourselves available to be present and to go with them, right? In this committed relationship, that we are considering what they share, that we are valuing what they share, and that we're able to hold what they share and make space for. So it's not about us agreeing with, right? It's about us creating space for them to be able to share what they feel and what they think, and our ability to be compassionate towards them when they share with us, right? And the last C is communication. And we already did an entire series on the importance of communication, especially in relationships, right? And so communication permits us to exchange clear information. Going back to the series, we know that we communicate to connect and to learn. We communicate to connect and to learn. So when we consider relationships and our communication, I want to raise the question, are we connecting and are we learning from the other? Right? Are we exchanging thoughts and feelings? or are we imposing on? See, active listening allows us to be able to hear the other from our heart, to fully be present, to fully be engaged in the conversation so that we can hear the heart of the other person that's sharing with us and be fully present in that moment. Communication strengthens the relationship because it offers clarity, it offers conciseness, and it offers completeness, right? Because we are building and developing healthy relationships, we need to be able to be clear with our communication, right? When we use clarity when we speak, we clearly express what we feel and what we think, right? And we allow the other person to respond to make sure that they understood what we stated, right? The conciseness helps us to build and strengthen the message so that the receiver of the message clearly heard what we stated, right? Because again, we communicate to connect and to learn. And it's important that we do this so that when we come together to converse and communicate, that we're just not talking, we're just not wasting energy, we're just not wasting time, because our time and our energy is valuable and we can't get it back. So when we go to the other person and we're communicating, we want to make sure that they are learning or gaining insight from what we are sharing. And that's the completeness, right? Because they're able to recognize the goal. And the goal is to learn from what the communicator is stating, whatever the messenger is sharing with the receiver. What are they saying? Right? Did they understand? Did they comprehend what was being stated? Right? And that allows for the braided dialogue to go forth so you can continue to connect and to learn from one another. And the three C's are essential elements in building and developing healthy relationship because it connects us. It allows us to become closer through connection and through learning from the other, learning how one another feels, learning how one another thinks, and we're able to value that through connection, right? We're able to value that through active listening. We're able to value that because we are fully present. We're able to value that because we're engaged in the person and what they are sharing. We are not distracted, right? So that is important. We don't need to be distracted if we are communicating with someone who we are in a relationship with, right? Because if we're distracted, then we're not completely present, we're not engaged, and we're not going to learn anything because we're not fully present, right? We shouldn't be distracted. And so as we conclude tonight and lift up healthy elements of communication, I just want to encourage us to continue on a journey of becoming our best self, becoming a healthy self, because when we become our best selves and when we become healthier, we invite others to be in healthy relationships with us, right? Just like with our boundaries, when we are able to know what we need and what we want, then we're able to communicate that with the other person who we are in relationship with and invite them to connect with us. And we're able to begin to take ownership in our relationships and how we want to be treated and the type of relationships that we want to be in, instead of pointing the finger and blaming and making excuses. So, as we continue in our series on building healthy relationships, I just want to encourage us to number one, acknowledge what is it that you need from your relationship, right? And how can you give it to yourself first in order for them to also invite them in to give it to you as well, right? So be able to communicate that with yourself so that you can communicate it with those who you are in relationship with, right? Secondly, to value yourself. We have to model that we value ourselves in order to invite healthy people into our lives to have healthy relationships. If we devalue ourselves, then we invite other people in to devalue us, right? And just like with the boundaries, I'm encouraging us to be accountable for how we treat ourselves, right? And let us be accountable to ourselves, how we treat ourselves, so we can really begin to build and develop healthier relationships. But it starts with having a healthy relationship with ourselves, right? And when we do this, we invite others in to creating and developing stronger, healthier relationships. I want to thank you for tuning in to another Dr. Myrna Minute. I pray that something I said sparked something within you as we continue on this journey together, building healthier selves and establishing healthier and stronger relationships. God bless, and I look forward to seeing you on next Friday. Thanks for tuning in.